that was where it all started to go wrong, I think. And then that mind-body dualism, that dichotomy causes a whole lot of problems for people, because it's caused this disconnect in how we look after ourselves, how we think about our physical health and our mental health, which are exactly the same thing. So there's a nice quote from the Royal College of Psychiatrists, which is, "There is no health without mental health."
Why does movement make us feel better mentally? And if so, why can we be so resistant to moving more? Welcome to Make Movement Matter, the podcast that zooms in to both learn more about specific areas of movement with specialists, as well as zooming out on bigger picture life stories where movement has been a catalyst for change. This week, my guest, Dr. Charlotte Marriott, who calls herself the Lifestyle Psychiatrist on Instagram, is a consultant NHS psychiatrist specialising in neuroscience, a certified lifestyle medicine physician, and a nature-based coach. Her unique approach to helping people is inspirational and goes far beyond the regular practice of psychiatry. Charlotte is incredibly well informed, so I greatly enjoyed this discussion where I learned a lot about why movement really is so key to both treat and, more importantly, prevent so many issues, both mentally and physically. I started off by asking how movement affects mental health physiologically.
Oh, this is a really interesting question, Wendy, and I think it's in lots and lots of different ways. So maybe we could think about some of the ways. I suppose if you think about taking a brisk walk or running or whatever form of exercise that it is that you're doing, what's the first thing that's happening is you're moving your muscles, and you're also moving your blood around your body. So that's the first physiological thing that's going to have an impact on your mental health and your brain health, because you'll be oxygenating your blood better, you'll be moving that oxygenated blood to your brain, and that will be improving, all of it, the health of the brain. That's the first thing to think about, I suppose. And then also when you're moving, you're priming your muscles for accepting glucose, you're improving your glucose regulation, and that's also going to be beneficial for your mental health as well. And when we're moving, what are we doing? In our hormones, we're releasing feel-good hormones like endorphins and oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline, and they make you feel good. They give you that kind of runner's high, where you feel energized and yet relaxed, but you also feel a sense of positivity and rejuvenation. So that's really important. And things like endorphins are a natural painkiller as well, so they can help you manage any pain that you might get in your muscles from exercising. But I think the really key thing that happens when we move is we produce a lot of something called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And what that is it's like a growth hormone for the brain, like a fertilizer for the brain. And it stimulates angiogenesis, which is making new blood vessels in the brain. It stimulates synaptogenesis, which is making new connections between our brain cells, and also, remarkably, neurogenesis as well. So it used to be like when I was at medical school 20 odd years ago, we were told that the brain fully develops by 25 and there's no new brain cells that occur after the age of 25. And in fact, your brain cells start dying.
I've heard that about your prefrontal cortex. Is that correct? Because in relation to my children, and they're all being male, and they're being more likely to risk take up to the age of 25,
right,
and then less likely to afterwards. I don't know if that's correct, but I also know that that's part of the reason that they are much higher to insure on cars up to the age of 25 than afterwards. So my assumption was, that grew and kind of stopped. Everything would just then stop. It got to its, adult stage.
Exactly. And that's partly correct. It's true, because your prefrontal cortex, that's the part of your brain that does planning and executive function, risk assessment, modulates your behavior, modulates your emotional responses to things. And so, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until 25. And it is therefore after 25 fully developed. Ideally. But we know from sort of originally from mouse studies and now also from human studies that when we exercise, we can grow new neurons predominantly or specifically in the hippocampus, which are two parts of the brain, one in the left and one in the right hemispheres. And the hippocampus is absolutely key for learning, memory, focus, also emotion as well. And so through exercise, we can actually change the structure of our brain to improve our cognition, to improve our memory, our ability to learn and take in new information, and also to improve our mood as well. So yes,
It's
hugely,
amazing.
hugely important and exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we are the bodies, the beings we are, and we move through space because we've got a brain that is driving us to do that. And even though if we had a much smaller brain, we would still be doing that and procreating and so on. But supposedly what separates us, or doesn't separate us, but makes us more complex beings is that ability to think. And perhaps that's a downside as well in many ways, because that's what can go wrong for humans, perhaps in a different way. So you are a consultant NHS psychiatrist, but you're also a certified lifestyle medicine physician. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
And a nature-based coach. And the reason that I find that really fascinating is because you have mixed two worlds in a sense. We're very used to medicine and psychiatry, particularly in the UK, I can only really speak to the UK, being more about treatment. So when problems present themselves, you go for treatment to the right places, which is really important. And aren't we lucky that we have that? Thank goodness.
Yeah.
But you've also chosen to also specialize in something called lifestyle medicine. So can you tell us a bit more what lifestyle means? Because it could be taken in many ways, I'd imagine, a bit like me being a natural movement coach. What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. And I think the word lifestyle and lifestyle medicine can be interpreted in different ways, and it's not always favorably interpreted.
Right.
Because it can sound pejorative in some ways, judgmental in others, and it can sound like we're telling people how they should be living their lives, and that some ways of living are good and some ways of living are bad, and that's not what it means at all.
No.
What it means really is the small things that we all do every day that can impact our health and our well-being, and we call those lifestyle factors. And broadly, the lifestyle pillars, we call them the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, are broken down into nutrition, physical activity, sleep, harmful substance or risky substance reduction, stress management, and positive psychology and connectedness. And they're all evidence-based. So lifestyle medicine is evidence-based medicine. There's a wealth of research going back decades about the things that we all do that impact our health and well-being. And sorry, I was just going to say, they show that we can prevent many, many, many different chronic diseases. Also, we can reverse. So we can use lifestyle medicine to treat and reverse chronic disease as well, including type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, depression, the cancers, the list goes on.
Which makes sense because to many, there is this sort of separation between the way we live our lives and then what happens to us. And I think a lot of people think that certain things that happen to them in their lives, it's part of their stack of cards they're born with, their genetic makeup, or it's more likely because people in previous generations have had XYZ and so on, and that perhaps they therefore feel powerless for that to not happen to them. And scared, clearly, as well, that is something that is more likely to happen to them. But what you're saying is that to a large extent, they have got power in their own hands, which is an empowering thing. That's amazing for someone to feel that way. But I notice in quite a lot of your stuff, you do talk about this evidence basis. And I really understand why that's important to say, because I'm sure sometimes when people see lifestyle medicine or talk about lifestyle medicine, they maybe go to thinking that it's more, I don't know how to say it nicely, airy, woo-woo side of things. And yet everything you've just said had no woo-woo to me.
Exactly.
It was all literally just the things we all do in our lives that pretty much all of, I would say maybe 4 or 5 out of 6, we've got control over. We're making a choice about. And obviously from my world, movement, I don't speak about nutrition. I don't speak about other things because they're not my field, my specialist field, and they're not, I'm not as passionate. I am in my own life, but not for others. Whereas
Yeah.
movement obviously is something I'm really passionate about because of my own journey. So from your perspective, why did you then get into lifestyle? Because I presume lifestyle medicine wasn't there at the start when you were, well, it was around, but you didn't specialize in that for a while. So why did you sort of lean in that direction?
Yeah, interesting. Well, I guess it's a long story, but just coming back to one thing you
Hmm.
said before I get into that was about the sort of genetic risk or the
Yeah.
familial risk
Yes.
that exists. So we know that there are genetic illnesses, for example, Huntington's chorea. If you have a parent with Huntington's, you've got a 50% chance of also
Right.
getting Huntington's chorea. So there are things that are genetic that we can't use lifestyle medicine to reduce the risk of. Then there are things that you may have a genetic propensity towards that you
Right.
can use lifestyle medicine to modulate your risk. So, for example, if you've got a strong family history of depression, it's not associated with particular genes that we know of, but it might
Okay.
increase your risk of developing depression yourself. But we know that if you do a lot of these lifestyle interventions, like regular physical activity and looking after your nutrition and all these other things, that you can modulate your own risk and improve your prospective risk of developing depression. So there are genetic factors, epigenetic factors, which is how we can use things that change our expression of our genes. And also, yeah, just things that can reduce our risk. So that was just one thing I wanted
No, that's
to bring up.
very fair. Thank you for sharing that, because yeah, it clarifies it for me as well.
Oh, good.
Because and these things are always nuanced, aren't they? There's
Yeah.
always layers, and it's important to say that. So yeah.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
what about you?
What about me? So my own journey. I think probably for me it goes all the way back to my own childhood and my own personal experiences. So I was lucky enough to grow up in a house with a garden, so I had outdoor space. We were very, very active as kids, constantly doing things like skipping, cycling, climbing trees. I'd do gymnastics in the garden with my sister, all that kind of stuff. Just constantly, always outside and moving. We had a vegetable patch, and so that kind of was my upbringing. We were not wealthy by any means, but we were lucky in that respect. And so I at that stage I wasn't really aware of it being part of health or improving my own health or anything like that. It was just what we did. It was natural, normal for us. And then when I was 18, I went to university in London. So I moved from a kind of semi-rural environment to big
The
city, bright
big
lights.
smoke.
Yeah,
Yeah. The big
yeah.
smoke, literally, especially at that point.
Exactly.
I
Yeah. So,
remember leaving the tube when I lived there and blowing my nose and
yes.
thinking, what's all this black on my hands?
Absolutely. Black
Yeah.
stuff came out your nose. Yeah,
I loved
yeah.
London, by the way. Just to say, I do love London, but I don't love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, don't love that. In lots of ways, it's not a healthy city to live in. If you think about, how busy it is, constantly rushing, the traffic, the pollution, the number of people, and the stress that caused me. So I found out living in the big city that I'm a country bumpkin. I need quiet. I need solitude. I need green space. And so living in London, I'd often get back from a day of studying at uni, and I'd go into my flat and I'd be kind of frustrated and irritable. And what I would do is I'd like throw my bag down and I'd leave the flat and I'd go for a walk or a run around the local park. Because in London there are parks everywhere. So,
Mm.
you find your green space, and I'd go for a walk or run for half an hour, and then I'd be okay again. I'd feel
Yeah.
I could relax, I could enjoy myself again. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to get rid of that sort of pent up frustration feeling. So that was when I started to think about the power of things like exercise, nature, mindful time on your own for your mental health and well-being. Um, and also, I carried on my healthy eating habits from childhood because, there's a load of evidence that shows if you're introduced to these healthy habits in early life, you take them with you throughout your life. So I was lucky
Oh,
from
I
that point
really
of
hope
view.
that's the case, because I've worked so hard.
It's definitely the case. There are lots of
It doesn't
papers about
always
that.
feel like it, but let's hope it comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it will. And then studying medicine and then working as a doctor, you see a lot of different people from all sorts of different walks of life, all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different lifestyle habits, all sorts of, different socio-demographic, economic situations and so on. And you can see a clear correlation between things like smoking, alcohol, substances, and physical health problems going forward. You can see a correlation between people's recovery from things like operations. If they're fit and active beforehand, they recovered so much more quickly
Right.
afterwards. So I was just becoming aware of all of these different things, and then started my training in psychiatry in 2006, and was noticing the same things were relevant to mental health as they were to physical health. And I just felt that in general, in conventional medical treatment, we often weren't addressing those things that could really make a difference for people's lives. So, for example, when I was doing general medical jobs, people would come in with a heart attack or a stroke or pneumonia or whatever it would be, and we would treat that one thing that they came in with, and then we'd send them home again. But I could see that there'd be so much potential if we could only just help them in all the different ways.
And did you sometimes forecast forward for that person sometimes and think they may be back, rather than, if I know I could just get a little bit more of their time and convince them, they may not be back?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And they're just, I guess the whole thing in the NHS is it's very, very, very overstretched. So you do what you do and you move on to the next thing, and it's very fast. And although it's person-centered, it's not always holistically person-centered. We're not always looking at the whole person. But in psychiatry, we do have that opportunity to look at the whole person. So I find that much more rewarding,
Right.
and we have more time in psychiatry with our patients too. So we
Okay.
can start to bring in these different things that could really make a difference more holistically in their lives. And then, so lifestyle medicine really wasn't a thing in the UK at all. It didn't have a name until about 2017, 18, something like that, I think.
Oh, that's relatively recent.
Really
Yeah.
recent, yeah. And it, the movement started in America, and then the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine was founded, and it's just grown exponentially ever since, because there are many, 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 many thousands of doctors like me who have this viewpoint, of how we can improve healthcare, how we can improve the health of the population, how we can improve the health of the nation, and we're very, very passionate about that. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a big movement now.
No, it's fascinating. I didn't realize it was quite so recent. And often these things do start off earlier in America and then come across. But as you say, we are really stretched in this country in the NHS. And if we think about the physical health side, which there really shouldn't be a separation, the way you treat it is separate. But
Yeah.
if someone is presenting to a GP with something that's seemingly very physical, and yet obviously there could be other things going on. I don't necessarily mean mental illness, but things that are affecting their psyche. They've got 10 minutes. And so for the doctor to get past what's happening physically to try and find out perhaps why that has happened is nigh on impossible. Now, I'm not here to do the NHS down, because they're working very hard with little means. So it's certainly not a thing. And there's lots of great people out there who, we talked about Dr. Chatterjee before, who are trying to very publicly say that there is power in your hands for those that can respond to it. And you talked a little bit there about physical and mental health. And I'm always very fascinated by this sort of being seen as separate. And I think still is. And it's probably partially because doctors go into psychiatry or general medicine, traditional, other, whatever you call it, physical medicine.
Exactly.
And therefore we then, as the general public, seem to have separated it out. And I don't know why that exists, because for me, they are in half the clients I see, the part of the reason that they have got into dysfunction is because something's happened in their lives, or they have lacked confidence. And therefore, I actually find that I end up treating, I don't treat people, sorry, but looking at both sides of the coin, how they feel and see movement in their lives, and what they believe they're capable of, and helping to build their confidence, which in turn means they're more likely to take on more, try more, the confidence builds, and it becomes a lovely upward cycle when you get it right, and they believe in their bodies again.
Yeah.
But that's believing with the mind in the
Yeah,
body.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
And I was just going to throw in one little story before I ask the question about it. But so my story is very relevant here, in that when I got into injury, I have my air quotes up, because nothing happened to me. I didn't fall over. I didn't have a crash. I was out running one day and came home, and during the night I woke up and I couldn't walk. And it was a lovely run. I remember it vividly. It was a gorgeous run. And my body had effectively just said, no more. Enough is enough. I found out through many years that I had a very twisted pelvis. The other muscles were desperately trying to hold on, because I then also found out I have hypermobility. Certain points in the month, everything gets a bit more lax. And I was running on an unstable foundation, that then, having a very sensitive constitution, very unmedical terminology there, but I really believe in it. I really felt my pain, and therefore I got into a chronic pain cycle for 4 years, which I couldn't separate out whether I was feeling the pain, which to me, it was incredibly real, and I still believe it was real.
Yeah.
But for me, what was interesting was that halfway through that process, I sort of stopped my treatment. I stopped when I was doing my rehab, because I was so frustrated that nothing was moving the dial forward. I had lost all hope that I would ever move the way I had before again. And I came to a kind of a moment where I realized I had to give up running in my head, which is weird because it's just one little thing. But giving up running in my head, and therefore the expectation of who I was going to be in the future versus who I was in the past, was the thing that relieved me of all the pressure I was effectively putting on myself to have a body that I didn't actually have. And looking back on that, that was the point that I started to move forward. And I truly believe that that was a mental shift that then started to help my body heal. And some people might see that as woo-woo. But for me, it absolutely, utterly proved to me that the body and the mind are more linked than we could even understand, particularly in pain and trauma. And I read an amazing book, which I'm sure you know off by heart, The Body Keeps the Score, by, I've got his name down because I didn't want to get it wrong, Bessel van der Kolk.
Yeah.
And it was a door opening in my mind that said, you're right, and this is okay, and keep going and believe in your body. It's an amazing vehicle, and you just need to work through this. So as a lot, but is there something you see a lot? And so do you see it as a two-way? Because obviously I'm coming at it from the movement and physical side. Do you see it very much as a two-way street between mind and body?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you so much for sharing your personal story, Wendy. I think our stories are really powerful, aren't they, for communicating things.
It's why I do what I do.
Yeah, exactly. Do I see it as a two-way street? No, because like you, there is no distinction in my mind between the mind and the body. It's a false dichotomy. Yeah.
Yes. Good. Yes. So, there is no disconnect. There's no separation. There's no armco in the middle.
No, because where is your brain? It is in your body. It's part of your body. It's an organ of the body, just like your heart is. We don't talk about the heart-body connection or the lung-body connection.
Although, interestingly, we talk about the gut.
Yes.
With the connection with the brain. And that's...
Yes. That's
a whole other topic.
It's a whole other story. Absolutely fascinating, the connection with the gut and the brain. Yes, but that just goes to show how interconnected everything is. So thinking about the gut and the brain, going off on a bit of a tangent, the brain and the gut are physically connected by your vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, longest cranial nerve in the body, goes all the way from your brainstem down through your pharynx into your thorax and to the heart, the lungs, the liver, the gut, the stomach, the colon, all of it. So direct connection.
Is there anything else that does that in the body?
Well, between the brain?
yes, has such a long connection, if you see what I mean, almost geographically through the body. Is there anything apart from your vessels, your blood vessels and so on?
Well, everything is connected, isn't it? Because
Well, I
we've got,
suppose,
yeah,
yeah,
it's all
sorry.
connected. And then you've got hormones as well, which are chemical messengers. So everything in the
True,
body is
true.
connected.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, that's like what do you call, like when you plug in your Wi-Fi, not the Wi-Fi, is it called like a LAN cable? Oh, I don't know, I'm using
Landline,
analogies
yes.
I don't
I know
understand.
what you mean. Landline, yes.
Yeah, so it's like, it's not, if you imagine hormones being like a Wi-Fi connection, and then the vagus nerve from your gut to your brain being like a plug-in
Oh, I
router
know,
connection.
Ethernet.
I don't understand these terms. Well, I don't know why I'm using this
I think
analogy.
we don't know about our technological stuff.
Okay, it's like a wire
Yes, it's a physical wire.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
So they're physically connected, but they're also connected through hormones and chemical messengers and neurotransmitters and all sorts of things. But yeah, so the brain is an organ in the body. It's, to me, the most fascinating organ of the body and the most fundamental. I've always thought, actually, as the body being the thing that carries your brain around, because you can't do anything else without your brain. It's
So
the
true.
single most important organ, and it controls all of the other organs, and they feed messages backwards and forwards. So there is no separation in my mind, although there's this false dichotomy that's existed for 100 years or more in medicine. So until I think the 1920s, around then, neurology and psychiatry were one discipline. And nowadays we think of neurologists looking after the nervous system as it pertains to the body, and psychiatrists looking after the mind. But until the 1920s, it was the same medical discipline. So
Right.
that was where it all started to go wrong, I think. And then that mind-body dualism, that dichotomy, causes a whole lot of problems for people, because it's caused this disconnect in how we look after ourselves, how we think about our physical health and our mental health, which are exactly the same thing. So there's a nice quote from the Royal College of Psychiatrists, which is, there is no health without mental health.
Yeah.
You know, like you can have a body in tip-top shape, but if your mental health is not good, you're not really healthy.
And that kind of presents itself in when you are in pain or you've had trauma of any kind. We very physically show that by the positions we hold, and I see that a lot where, and I certainly have seen it in myself, where we go into that sort of protective, in utero kind of curved shape, because it's like a fearful thing. And it's lovely to then see the sort of open, confident, unraveled person who's feeling, in my case, great about the fact that they can do this and that again, and they move freely. It is. So we're almost being given a signal by the body.
Oh, constantly. Absolutely. And that's a really nice way for everybody to understand it, because you know how you feel if you get some bad news, you're crestfallen, and your shoulders drop, and you look down and you look inwards, and you do curl in that C shape, like, oh no. And then imagine you're feeling really proud of yourself. You might feel a bit puffed up. We talk about puffed
arms up and
like a power pose.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So our emotions absolutely correlate with our physiology and with our physicality, 100%, and it works both ways too. Like you hear about people who do a lot of public speaking. Before they go on stage, they're doing power poses to make themselves feel strong and confident, and it helps if you lift your chest and you take a deep breath.
And yet that's the other way around, isn't it? So if we, I don't want to say the two-way street, but it's where one is driving the other in a different way. So it's not the emotions, they're creating that confidence and that positive feeling by using their body in a certain pattern that makes them feel expansive and open and sort of this sort of excited feel, to harness that to then go and do something. So that's a really good way of thinking about it the other way around.
Absolutely. So it's super interesting how it all works. And then we can think about how our emotions can dictate our physical health as well. So, for example, if you have a lot of stress, you might develop a migraine. Or you might get an upset tummy, or there's so many different ways that how we feel emotionally impacts our physical well-being, and vice versa.
So in terms of how you go about treatment, and I'm talking more about people who don't have, serious mental illness. So the person on the street who is perhaps struggling a bit, and so on, would you always then go to lifestyle tools first to look at the way that they live their lives, or would you say this has got to be an integrated approach? How would you normally come at things? Because you've got your two hats in a sense.
Yes,
even though they're the one hat.
Well, yeah, that's the trouble. That's what I was going to say. I don't actually work with people who don't have serious mental illness. So all of the patients I look after have well, they're in my NHS role, so I don't do any private practice. So they all do have serious mental illness. But I guess it's the same thing, that the same principles apply, that we would be looking at what are the current issues for that person right now and what's going to help them the most. And for some people, it can be medication. For some people, it can be talking therapies. For some people, they are ready and willing and wanting to make changes in their lives and in their habits. And it's about what's the right thing for that person right now, and sort of assessing people's readiness to change, their confidence to make a change, how important it is to them. That's really key to knowing what to focus on and when.
And how often do you find that you discuss movement as part of that strategy?
All the time. Yeah. So I try and have these conversations with my patients all the time about, what do you eat, what your eating habits like? Do you drink plenty of water? And doctors are always asking about smoking and alcohol and drugs and things like that, but also asking about what physical activity do you enjoy? Do you go for walks? Do you spend time outdoors? What's your sleep like? And just trying to incorporate it and make it part of what I do every day, and with varying degrees of success, because people are either interested and ready or they're not,
And so for someone who is more ready, let's say, who wants to make a change and perhaps is wanting to have medication as the last thing that they decide to do, wanting to bring in other tools in the meantime, there's the guidelines. There's the 150 minutes moderate or 75 vigorous a week and so on, which I find, I know there has to be a guideline. I understand that, but I find it very restrictive because, particularly in my world, that's about exercise in inverted commas rather than movement. And one of the things that I feel was an issue in my life, and I see in other people, is that the level of sedentarism is significant. And I believe there are studies that you may be able to quote or not about the sort of equal difficulty it brings you being sedentary as much as smoking in some instances, which for me is extraordinary that then we can manage to get this brilliant message across about smoking that has really changed hugely in the last decades.
Yeah.
And yet we can't so much about sedentarism. And my belief, and I am not science-based, my pure personal belief is that regularity in movement throughout the day in whatever form is really important. And that's coming literally from my sample of me, and people who agree with me, that when my brain slows down, when my energy lowers, when I haven't been outside enough, but like your London experience, I feel kind of caged. I feel frustrated emotionally, but also physically I get itchy. And I've almost trained myself out of being able to sit for too long now.
Same.
And I feel uncomfortable in my body.
Yeah.
And so I therefore know it's almost like a learned thing that if you're consistent with your little movement breaks, not only do you feel like you sort of just moved the things that want to be moving, but also mentally you just feel a little bit sharper, definitely happier by the end of the day, and so on. And yet sort of conveying that through messaging and encouraging is interesting, because obviously people will see the fact that, well, I sit at a desk to do my job for 8 hours a day. How can I? And obviously I come up with little solutions And many people have the kind of take the stairs versus the lift type of thing, or balancing on one leg when because you're going to go and make a coffee at some point, or you're going to go to the loo. So walk backwards together. Look like the odd one out. Why not? But I find that is quite it's not seen as beneficial in the way that exercise, in inverted commas, is. And yet I believe it's really powerful. So tell me if I'm right or wrong.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Wendy. And I think the word exercise has so many bad connotations, doesn't it, as well? People think about exercise as being like no fun, no pain, no gain. We exercise to lose weight. We exercise to get fitter. But there's so little thinking around exercise as being something for joy, for happiness, for freedom in your body, for just enjoying moving. And I think those are some of the messages we need to get across. And then you mentioned the government guidelines, 150 minutes a week. Absolutely. But if you look at the poster in the bottom left corner, it does say reduce sedentary time. And that's a really good place to start. I completely agree, because so many of us are sitting for long periods in the day. And when you're sitting, what's happening? Your body's stagnating, your spine is suffering in terms of its morphology, and also your blood is stagnating, you're pooling blood that's not moving, there's not much oxygen getting around to your organs and your brain, and it's just, you end up really sort of feeling sludgy and you just, lethargic. And you can't think straight.
Yet most of the world is set up to get people, the modern world, for those who are, desk workers, and yet expecting productivity. That, expecting people not to then have mental health and physical health issues. Because obviously, really also true. From my perspective, it's also you're sat in one position, so you're tightening. Well, you're basically becoming a really good chair shape in your body. Exactly. And therefore, when you try to then open out that shape, you struggle. And yet then you also go to the gym, potentially. So if you see yourself as a mover and you go to the gym and you expect yourself to be nice and mobile, and very few people, they may start with a warm-up of a couple of stretches, but they certainly don't usually do a full joint mobility routine beforehand that would help to get them ready for exercise. And then often are doing quite high impact work that so it's which was me, which is why I say that was very much me, particularly through my 20s, and I think that was all worked up to what became a problem. I think because we're all like onions, aren't we? We've got these layers that we build up of function, dysfunction, trauma, and so on, so we become a thing, and sometimes that thing falls apart a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And you're more likely to get injured if you're not moving regularly, and then you hit the gym. You're much more likely to get injured than if you're just moving a little bit regularly throughout the day. And there's a really, really nice poster from the World Health Organization. I wish I could show it to you right now, but what it has, it's a kind of graph, and it's a, like a hyperbolic shape where it goes up quite steeply and then plateaus off. And along the bottom axis, it says 0 exercise right at the bottom, and then you get no benefits. And then a little bit of exercise is where you hit that real upswing.
Steep curve.
Steep curve, exactly. So moving from nothing to something gives you the greatest benefit in your health. And then if you add on a bit more, you get a little bit more benefit. You run a marathon, a little bit more benefit. But really, the biggest impact on your health and well-being comes from when you go from doing nothing to just something. And something can be so small. It can be just reducing your sedentary time. It can be just dancing to a song. It can be taking the stairs instead of a lift. So that's the real key thing, is to make it so small and easy that the benefits are huge, and it's not a hard task. It's not running 5K. It's not hitting the gym. It's just doing something, just one small thing.
And I think also the thing that is harder for people to then do those things consistently is that connection, because it's almost like, okay, I believe you, but I don't necessarily feel it. And I said before, I'm kind of what I would see as a sensitive constitution, whereby I really feel emotionally, I feel my body very physically, very easily where it is, what's going wrong? I feel pain more, and so on. Whereas a lot of people don't feel in the same way because they've never had that sort of connection. I don't know whether there is a real physical thing. But how do we convince those people that just moving the dial that tiny little bit is worth doing consistently and making a habit?
I think it's got to be experiential, you know. You can tell people things till you're blue in the face, but until somebody experiences it for themselves, they're not really going to understand it. And I'll tell you a small anecdote. It's a little bit separate, but it illustrates the point perhaps. So I was doing this outdoor coaching day for a charity, and we had a whole load of police staff come to spend the day, and we did coaching activities. And this one lady arrived, and she was just like, "I'm only here so I can get out of the office. I hate being outdoors. I want to be at home on my sofa watching Netflix. That's what I want to be doing. So let's just get on with this." And then I was talking to her about being outside and why she didn't like it, and all of this, and she was like, "It's fine, it's fine." And she sat down in this armchair, not an armchair, deck chair. She sat in this deck chair. She sat in this deck chair, and she just progressively, you could see her body just relaxing more and more and more. And within half an hour of sitting in this field, she went, "Oh, I feel amazing. I feel so relaxed. This is incredible. Maybe I do like being outdoors." And it was just that experience that she'd never had. She'd always said, "I'm not an outdoors person. I don't like being outdoors." And just half an hour of spending time in nature, her whole idea about it changed.
And also you asking her to self-reflect. So you asking her to slightly question the barriers that she was putting up by saying, "No, I prefer this," or "No, I'm not that type of a person." Now, we're all outside people because we came to the
By
outside.
default, yeah.
Exactly. We didn't have these cement boxes. So it's interesting how we have modernized ourselves in that respect and therefore restricted ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a really great story because
Yeah.
the fact that she could see that shift so quickly, and it would be lovely to know now, did she then go on to maybe start walking
I
or?
really hope so.
Yeah.
She said she was going to spend more time doing outdoors things after that day. So I really hope she did take that forward.
Well, I bet she
Yeah.
did. And that's that beautiful ripple effect that we talk about where you've sown a seed, and maybe someone just tries something small.
Yes.
And although we talk about exercise, if we start by talking about movement and outdoors and so on, we hope that the ripple means that either them or someone near to them is affected by that positively and takes it that bit further and so on, because they almost get so into it that it becomes that thing. So tell me a bit more about your nature-based coaching, because that sounds fascinating.
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, I'm not doing it at the moment because I just
Okay.
don't have the time or the
Oh.
resources. Yeah, I just don't have the time. But yeah, it's something I'd definitely like to do more of in the future. I really found during the pandemic, this was when I found that the kind of benefits of it was that, you know, we couldn't be getting our patients into clinic to see us. We couldn't go into their homes because we were social distancing and all of that. So when I needed to see people face to face, we'd often go for a walk in nature.
Brilliant.
And I noticed like it was just extraordinary walking side by side with someone. We had a totally different conversation. They opened up in a totally new way and told me things they'd never talked about before. And I was, wow, this is super interesting. The power it has to connect in a new way, and I just thought it was a very profound experience. So it's something I would like to do much more of in the future, but yeah, at the moment I'm not currently doing that.
And it's well reported that that sort of effects of being in nature also are incredibly beneficial for your mental health, which is obviously something that you felt in yourself from your childhood when you
Yeah.
didn't get it. And is that something that you will also say to patients and to people about how the importance of getting out?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, all the time. And luckily, I work in a really well-resourced team, and we run 2 walking groups a week. So one of them is a city-based walk, but you know, we live in a small city. We work in a small city where we have a canal and a river and parks, and so there's a lot of green space involved in that. But also one one walk a week is in the nearby hills. So
Oh,
the staff take patients up the hill for a walk, and yeah,
amazing.
it's really
And
great.
great for you as much as for them.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
get the best out of them, but also you're working in the most, because often hospitals or those types of environments can be the exact opposite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
fake lighting and the feeling like stagnant air and so on, which is
Yeah.
less conducive to health.
Yeah, absolutely. And overheating as well. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been really, really interesting talking to you. So obviously this podcast is called Make Movement Matter because I, and clearly you, believe that it's something really, really powerful. So do you have any little, any cautions, first of all, about the connection between movement and mental health, and any thing that we should be, when we think about loved ones and advising them and so on, anything we should be cautious
Mm.
about? But then also, what would you say in the movement sphere, if you can think of it, is sort of your most effective thing that you get people to do physically that then helps with their mental health?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, so cautions. I guess the main cautions are that not to do too much too soon. To build up slowly so that you can get used to whatever the new activity is that you're taking on, and also to be aware of any not to do things that you're not physically capable of. That's the key thing. And if you have any underlying cardiovascular problems, it's always a good idea just to
Right.
get that checked out. We don't want to cause any people any problems. But the other risk, I suppose, is that people can become obsessed and get obsessional about,
Absolutely. Right.
yeah. And I think that can be really unhelpful. So even just things like people can get totally obsessed with watching their heart rate going up when they're exercising on their smartwatches or Fitbits or
Yes.
whatever.
Or whether
Um,
they've done their X steps, etc.
exactly, exactly. So I think taking away monitoring is a good thing. And I think if you are monitoring stuff, don't don't pay too much attention to it.
Yeah,
Listen to your body instead rather than looking at numbers.
that's great
Um,
advice.
Yeah, and actually, just on that point, there's this advert for this smartwatch. I don't know which brand it is, so not that I'm avoiding mentioning it, I just don't know. But there's this advert where the smartwatch tells you when is the optimal time to exercise, when is the optimal time to rest, how much sleep you've been getting, and what that means. I was like, whoa, this is really bad if we're starting to rely on digital devices telling us when we need to rest,
Yes,
when
it
we
stops you, as you say, connecting to how you feel.
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
and what you were mentioning before about being sensitive, having a sensitive constitution, I think what you're describing is you've got good interoception. You're able to look inwards and see what's happening in your body and your mind. And the more we're relying on external devices to tell us, we're in big trouble if we're
yeah,
doing that.
yeah.
I think that's my personal view.
No,
So
I would completely agree. And I had a smartwatch, and apart from the fact I didn't work out how to turn off the pingers, like we were talking about before, the
yeah,
notifications, was I
yeah,
absolutely hated. I did notice how much, not necessarily how much it drove me to change my behavior, but how it made me over assess.
mm,
And one thing that I learned with chronic pain was that part of the reason that I felt like it kept going was that I subconsciously and consciously regularly checked in on how my pain was, that moment,
right,
that time, that position, whatever. And actually, when I started to improve, it was because I managed to release myself from that checkup all the time.
yeah,
And it's the same thing with one of these monitors, where, as you say, you can become over obsessive about it.
yeah.
And it either drives you to make positive change, or you use it as something to beat yourself up with.
Yeah, a stick to beat yourself with, or it makes you really anxious. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
my heart rate's gone up. Oh my gosh, what does that mean? Have I got a cardiovascular problem? And oh, what do I need to be doing differently? And it can make you very, very, very anxious. So I think
And
it can be
otherwise, you wouldn't know necessarily about the heart rate
exactly,
unless you felt it going a little bit faster, as it may normally do, because you've
exactly.
got up very quickly and then gone straight up the stairs or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's one caution I would have. And then what was your other question?
So
What would I
I was just
advise?
saying, what what's the thing that has that's in the movement sphere that you recommend to people that you feel sort of moves that needle the most to help them improve their mental health?
Yeah, I would say find the one thing that you can do for just 5 minutes a day that brings you joy. So if you only find it very, very small, 5 minutes, everyone can find 5 minutes, I'm sure. And if it's going for a quick walk or, dancing in the kitchen or doing some weight training, if that's what you enjoy, just 5 minutes a day, because we can be quite all or nothing in our approach as human beings. Kind of like, well, I wanted to go for a run, but I don't have 45 minutes, so I won't bother.
And I
Or
couldn't change and get sweaty. Yeah.
exactly. So we can be really all or nothing. But if you just aim for 5 minutes, it makes it so accessible that you've got no excuse not to do it. So you just say, well, I haven't got half an hour, but I'm just going to go for 5 minutes. Or I feel really low in energy today and I don't feel like going for a run, but I'll just go for a walk for 5 minutes instead. But by the time you've done 5 minutes, you're going to be feeling different.
And you might do another 5.
Yeah, exactly. Or you might just keep going and do a half hour or whatever. And even if you don't keep going and do more time, 5 minutes a day is better than 0 minutes a day. Yeah. And 5 minutes every day adds up over the course of a week.
And with your curve, it's way better than doing 0 minutes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And if it's something that brings you joy, makes you happy, and is good for relieving stress or calming you down or just shifting your mood, all of those things can be just so helpful.
And applauding yourself for having done it.
Absolutely.
Because I think that for me, that sort of looping back in the cycle means you're far more likely to do it again, because you have literally almost physically patted yourself on the back to say, yeah, I did that. And I didn't want to, but do you know what? It made me feel better. So I registered it made me feel better. And I registered that it feels good to have done the thing that I set out to do.
Definitely. And my other top tip in that then would be, don't let the weather hold you back. Especially in the UK, sometimes it's pouring with rain. You think, oh my gosh, there's no way. But I have a dog, so I have to walk my dog. Sometimes it's pouring with rain. I don't feel like going out, but I do. And then I find like it's really just made me feel so happy. The rain is coming. I'm wet. It doesn't matter. It's just joyful.
Yeah. And if you just surrender, I am going to get wet. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to be wet. Well, I am going to get out the shower. At least I've got clothes to cover some of me. Yeah, I think once you decide to move that barrier aside, then it's only good. And I always believe myself, and I rarely see it as different in others. You rarely regret moving. You rarely feel worse unless you're in a real pain cycle and so on. But for doing the movement that you can do at your level, and as you say, the thing that brings you pleasure and joy, it's really a bad or a wrong thing to do. You usually come out of it feeling both physically and mentally better. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's an opportunity as well, isn't it, to meet new people, learn new skills, try something you've never tried before, and really just challenge it. Like, there are so many different things you can get from it. It's not just about your physical health or your mental health, but your social health and your general well-being and positivity and all of that. So yeah, I think there are no wrong reasons to move.
Exactly. Love that. We'll definitely end there. That's perfect. The perfect positive. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really, really grateful for your time and your insight. And I really enjoyed our discussion.
Oh, thank you so much. I loved it. Thank you for having me.
I always love hearing my guests' movement stories or learning from them about topics they're passionate about. I hope you've enjoyed listening. And if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.